Give me a moment of your time, and I will dissolve your fragility. Not through false motivations, not by filling your ears with empty words of encouragement, but by showing you what you have always labeled as fragility for what it truly is. A mirage, a story, a set of lies that you have repeated to yourself so often that you have confused them with your identity. And if you are willing to listen carefully, if you are willing to tolerate the discomfort and allow Nietzsche to speak to the parts of you that you have kept hidden, then something inside you will break. And what replaces it won't be a perfected version of you. It will be the version that has always been there, hidden beneath the fragility, waiting for the moment when you stopped defending it. Let me be clear. Nietzsche did not believe in the relief of the fragile. He did not write for the vulnerable, the delicate, or the eternally worried. He wrote for those who were ready to face the brutality of existence with eyes wide open. Those who were tired of fooling themselves. Those who had realized that nothing was coming to redeem them and had finally decided to stop waiting. And if you have come to this point, if you are tired of fear, of passivity, of justifications, of the emotional swelling that has made you invisible, then this is your beginning, not your transformation. Your return, because the power has never been outside of you. It was simply hidden under layers of insecurity, social conditioning, and dependence on comfort. So let's start with a question. What does it mean to be fragile? Most people believe that fragility consists of crying excessively, being physically small, or lacking self-control. But Nietzsche would tell you the opposite. Frailty is not emotional manifestation. Frailty is emotional subordination. Frailty is asking for permission. Frailty is delegating your validation to people who don't even understand themselves. But before continuing, like the video, share it with people who could benefit from it, and write in the comments from which city you follow our YouTube channel. Frailty is preferring peace to truth. Frailty is lying about your desires just to avoid judgment. Frailty is calling your inertia self-care, your fear modesty, and your insecurity compassion. Frailty is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of self-betrayal. And here is the harsh truth. The contemporary world is designed to make you fragile. Your education has taught you to submit. Your culture has accustomed you to conform. The media transmits to you a sense of helplessness disguised as awareness. And even the people who claim to love you, many of them benefit from your kindness, your silence, your hesitation. So they feed it. They praise your altruism. They reward your passivity. They applaud your moderation, not because it benefits you, but because it makes you small, predictable, dependent, and, worst of all, negligible. Nietzsche noticed this. He noticed the way society molds you into a domesticated version of yourself, and he declared, "The individual has always had to fight, not to be swamped by the tribe." He didn't mean physical combat. He meant psychological combat. The battle to stay true to your instincts when the world demands you neutralize them. The battle to remain dangerous, non-violent, non-chaotic, but dangerous in a world that wants you to be polite, refined, and submissive. So the first step to erasing your fragility is to understand that you have been conditioned to mistake fragility for virtue, to believe that saying no is rude, that setting boundaries is selfish, that choosing yourself is narcissism. But Nietzsche completely turns this perspective on its head. He argues that true strength, the strength that makes you magnetic, respected, memorable, comes from the rejection of collective thinking, from the rejection of security, from the rejection of the need to be liked. So let me ask you, who are you without the need to be liked? Concretely, not theoretically. Remove the filters. Stop modifying yourself. If no one required you to be kind, pleasant, modest, passive, who would you be? What would you say? What would you claim? What would you distance yourself from? Most people don't know the answer because they have built their identity entirely on reactions, on feedback. They don't have a self. They have a mask, a personality sculpted to fit in, to survive. And Nietzsche hated that. For him, It was the death of the human spirit. Because the moment you stop being dangerous, the moment you start filtering your truth to fit a system, you have already given up your power. But you already feel it, don't you? That silent resentment, that latent frustration, that tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep is not exhaustion. That is the price of fragility. The cost of living in a way that silences your deepest instincts just to keep the surface smooth. That's what Nietzsche would tell you now. You were not born to be fragile. You were not born to be tolerant of everything. You were not born to bend every time someone raises an eyebrow. You were born to embody something sharper, something primal, not chaotic but unshakable, not reckless but untouchable. And the reason you feel fragile is because you've denied that part of yourself for so long. You've started to believe it never existed, but it did. It does. And we'll get it right back. Let's talk about your habits. Because fragility lives in routine, in subtle daily rituals that slowly chip away at your willpower while convincing you that you're doing fine. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." You wake up and check your phone. You've already lost. Not because phones are bad, but because you haven't taken ownership of the day. You've given it away. You scroll, you compare, you envy, and then you rationalize. You say it's harmless, but every time you react before you create, you weaken the muscle of sovereignty. You become emotionally flaccid. You lose your edge. You lose control. So let's turn things around. Start owning your mornings before you even check a screen. Check your posture. Check your breathing. Remember that you are not a consumer first. You are a creator, a builder, a strategist, and your energy is not available to algorithms the moment you open your eyes. Then, your speech. Frailty shows up in your words, in the way you put yourself down to put people at ease, in the way you speak softly so they don't feel threatened, the way you say, "I don't know," when you know, and the way you apologize for things that don't require an apology. You're losing energy, and they can feel it. That's why they don't listen to you. That's why they talk over you. That's why they underestimate you. Nietzsche didn't whisper. He wrote with fire, and he expected you to do the same. Not to make noise, but to be clear. Clarity is strength. Clarity makes people think. It brings them closer. And if your presence doesn't have that effect yet, then you have work to do. Not because you are broken, but because you have been hiding. Stop hiding. Be aware of your opinions. Tell them they are clear. Don't explain them. Let the silence after you speak have weight. Most people are afraid of silence. You won't be, because silence means tension. And tension is how you earn respect. Now let's talk about emotions. You think strength means feeling nothing. That's wrong. That's dysfunction. Nietzsche didn't teach emotional numbness. He taught emotional command. That means you can feel everything and still choose your action. You don't react, you respond. When someone disrespects you, you don't explode. You don't chase. You don't defend yourself. You just stare. You wait. And when you move, it's calculated. It's precise. It's surgical. That's strength. Frailty is emotion without awareness. Strength is emotion under control. So stop saying, "I'm just an emotional person." That's a lie. You're just undisciplined. And discipline isn't cold. It's clean. It's precise. It's the difference between crying during a breakdown and crying on purpose. The first makes you a victim. The second makes you human. And speaking of victims, Nietzsche hated them. He believed that victimhood was the modern form of slavery, not physical slavery, but psychological slavery, the need to blame, to wait for rescue, to justify stagnation with trauma. He didn't deny the pain. He denied the passivity. Here's what to do. Stop telling your story as if it were a tragedy. Stop acting out your traumas as identities. Stop using your pain as a weapon for sympathy. Start turning it into steel. Because that's the truth. No one cares what happened to you. Not really. They care what you become in spite of it all. And if you can become something impenetrable, something refined, something silent but unshakable, then your past becomes a forge, and your scars become your armor. Nietzsche said that he who has a why to live for can endure almost any how. But here's the secret. Your why hasn't been found. It's been chosen. You don't wait for it. You decide it. You carve it into your days. And the moment you do, fragility begins to dissolve. Because when you know the direction, distractions disappear. Drama fades. Doubt becomes noise, and fragility loses its grip. So decide. Decide now. Who do you serve? What do you build? What do you protect? What would you not tolerate another day of? Make it real. Write it down. And make it non-negotiable. Because if you don't choose a why, the world will assign you one. And it will be fragile. It will be soft. It will make you obedient, poor, and forgettable. But that is not your destiny. Not anymore. Because when this is over, you will never be the same. And now we will go even deeper. We will confront your subconscious. We will dismantle the habits that enslave you. And we will begin the final process of reintroducing yourself. The version of you that never needed fixing, only liberation. You have come this far. That means one thing. You are not like the others, because most people can't sit still when someone touches their weak spot. Most people flinch, click away, chase another hit of dopamine, pretend they already know. But you're still here. And that means something inside you is starting to awaken. Something ancient, something raw, something buried. Nietzsche didn't just write about power. He wrote about what makes men fearful. He knew that fragility isn't just physical or mental, it's existential. It's rooted in the stories you've accepted, the definitions you've inherited, the silent agreements you made with fear before you even knew what fear was. And one of the deepest roots of fragility, the fear of being alone. Let's talk about it. You've spent your whole life trying to feel at home. At school, they taught you to raise your hand for permission. Friends taught you to stay within the tribe. Family taught you to repress what is uncomfortable. Relationships taught you to be polite, non-threatening, and calm. And slowly, you became addicted to acceptance, not love, acceptance. The kind of passive and dead inclusion that forces you to shrink, to be silent, and to change shape just to be tolerated. But Nietzsche would look you in the eye and tell you that you have to be willing to be completely alone if you want to know yourself. Because the truth is that belonging has a price, and most people pay with their authenticity, with their strength, with their individuality. But not you. Not anymore. You will unlearn the dependence on belonging. You will become a person who doesn't beg for a seat at the table. You will build your own table. And if no one joins you, fine. More space, more spaciousness, more clarity. That's the first upgrade. Solitude instead of submission. Now let's dig deeper. Why do you procrastinate? Why do you sabotage yourself? Why do you put off the things you know will make you feel better? Most people think it's laziness. It's not. It's a hidden loyalty, a psychological contract you made long ago to stay small so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Somewhere in your past, you learned that shining too bright pushes people away. You learned that power comes with distance, that honesty comes with punishment, that ambition comes with loneliness. So you adapted. You have learned how to tone down, how to delay, how to talk yourself out of your momentum, just to make things safe. This is not laziness. This is survival. But it is time to break the contract, because you are not here to be tolerated. You are here to be heard. And that takes intensity. It takes decisiveness. It takes the kind of clarity that makes ordinary people uncomfortable. Nietzsche said, "The snake that cannot shed its skin must die." That is what fragility really is. The refusal to evolve because you are afraid of who you might lose if you did. But now you will have to shed your skin. Not gently, not slowly. You will tear it off. The one who tries to please everyone, the one who is indecisive, the one who exaggerates, the emotional translator. Gone. Let's move on to tactics. Start with your tongue. Every time you say, "I don't know," when you do, you reinforce uncertainty. Every time you say, "maybe," when you really mean no, you undermine your integrity. Every time you apologize for existing, for interrupting, for needing something, you cut your own spine. Speak clearly. Don't soften, don't qualify, don't filter. People will say you are rude. Let them. It is just a reflex of those who are used to seeing you as small, and that's it. Then your body. Fragility hides in your posture, in the way you sit, in the way you move, and in the way you breathe. Most people live like prey, slouched shoulders, downcast eyes, shallow breaths. It is possible to tell someone's story through their frame, but now, change yours. Act like someone who knows they are being watched. Walk like someone who expects to be followed. Sit like someone who doesn't ask permission. In every room you enter, you dominate. Not by force, but by presence. Presence comes from certainty, and certainty comes from alignment. So ask yourself, what do I believe so deeply that I walk away from anything that doesn't honor it? Write it down. Carry it with you. Live by it. Let it be reflected in everything you do. Now let's kill something else. Victimhood. Nietzsche despised the modern tendency to glorify suffering. He saw it as a trap. When you make your pain your personality, you become addicted to fragility. You become loyal to your struggle. In it, you find your identity. But here's the truth. No one cares what you survived. They care what you became because of it. And if all you've become is bitter, anxious, fragile, then you've let your story win. So rewrite it. Don't say I survived trauma. Say I'm a fire builder. Don't say I was abused. Say I became untouchable. Don't say I suffer from anxiety. Say I own stillness. Words are spells. Speak your power or stay silent. Now let's wrap up, because you already knew everything I said. Somewhere inside you, the real you, the down-to-earth, clear, calm, and dominant version, listened to every word and nodded, remembering what it feels like to have strength, what it feels like to have clarity, what it feels like to act without excuses, to protect your energy like a king guards his land, to walk away from conversations that make you smaller, to say no with your chest, to say yes only to the things that make you stronger, to sit in silence and not feel the need to fill it. This is not motivation. This is home. You are back. But here's the problem. You can't not know. You can't go back to being the version of you who made excuses, who procrastinated, who broke promises to yourself. Because now you know better than anyone. And when you understand more, you either evolve or you lie. So choose. Become the man Nietzsche would respect. Not the loudest, not the richest, not the most praised, the most authentic, the one who looks in the mirror and sees no hesitation, only presence. This is your current standard. Cherish it as if your life depends on it, because it does.
Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an almost supernatural control over their environment without even saying a word? They don't scream for attention, nor do they beg for approval. They just retreat. And suddenly, everything around them is transformed. The energy of the room shifts, the dynamics reverse. The others begin to question, to chase, to feel an inexplicable urgency. Now, imagine for just a moment if that person were you. If you learned to master this silent, magnetic force. What would happen if you stopped reacting instantly to every stimulus? If, faced with a provocation, you chose silence instead of an automatic reply? A strategic retreat instead of an emotional explosion? Do you think your world, your relationships, would remain the same? Here lies a power that few fully understand. When you stop being constantly available on an emotional, physical, and psychological level, the world around you enters a beneficial crisis. People are used to controlling you through your reactions. But before continuing, like the video, share it with those who might appreciate it, and write us in the comments from which city you follow our channel. Your support allows us to continue creating content like this, helping us reach more and more people looking for a profound transformation. Your predictability is their greatest tool of control. Your impulses, your need to explain and justify yourself, are the strings with which they move you. But the day you decide, with awareness, to withdraw from this game, everything changes radically and definitively. Those who thought they knew you, that they understood you, realize a disconcerting and destabilizing truth. They realize, with a mixture of frustration and bewilderment, that they know absolutely nothing about your true and profound essence. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung once said a revealing phrase: "Everything that irritates us in others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Think carefully about the meaning of these words in the context of your life. When you become deliberately inaccessible, who really despairs? Who feels irritated by your new and imperturbable calm? Who desperately tries to provoke you, just to wring from you an emotion, a reaction that can confirm the old and comfortable pattern? This behavior reveals much more about their insecurity than it does about you, and above all, it reveals to you in an almost brutal way how much you have been, up until now, manipulated and drained without even realizing it. You have continued to give of yourself to please. You have maintained a false peace, just so as not to lose people who, deep down, were never really with you, but only with the function you performed. And with every yes that you felt forced, with every answer given out of duty, you have given away a precious piece of your vital energy. At the end of the day, after giving yourself to everyone, what is left of you? Often only tiredness, frustration, a sense of inner emptiness that you can't explain, a bitterness that you don't know where it comes from. The reason is that you are too available to those who don't deserve your silence. This video is not an invitation to turn your back on the world with cynicism. On the contrary, it is an invitation to choose yourself, first of all. To begin that sacred process that Jung called individuation, the path to becoming a complete, authentic, and whole human being. And this inner journey begins the moment you understand a fundamental principle. Your conscious silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments. This retreat, when it does not arise from fear but from a deep centering, is not an act of weakness, but the highest manifestation of personal power. So now I ask you, looking you straight in the eye, how long will you continue to be controlled by the emotions of others? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone, deliberately or not, picks at one of your old wounds? Maybe it's finally time to cut those invisible strings. It's time to retreat not from the world, but from the pointless drama that surrounds you. It's time to become a mystery to those who took you for granted. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. You were taught from childhood to always be present, to respond quickly, to please for love and approval. You were told to say yes, even when every fiber of your being screamed a categorical no, a no that you stifled. We have been programmed to believe that our value lies there, in our unlimited and unconditional availability to others. But here is a truth that perhaps no one has ever told you with this clarity. This excessive availability is not a virtue. It is a prison. An invisible prison whose walls are built on the fear of rejection. And as long as you continue to think that you must always be reachable, emotionally or otherwise, you will be manipulated, drained, and then forgotten as soon as you are no longer functional to their purposes. Do you know why? Because being always available makes you predictable. And everything that is predictable, in the eyes of those who want to use others, becomes a tool. People start using you as an emotional emergency button, to be pressed every time they need something. They seek you out when they want attention, relief, validation. And then, just as easily, they put you on a shelf until the next crisis. You, in the meantime, remain trapped in the illusion that being there for everyone will ensure that, in your need, someone will finally be there for you. But that is not the case. Carl Jung spoke at length about the persona. This is the social mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized. And it is precisely this mask, your desire to be the good and available person, that makes you excessively and dangerously accessible. You say, "I'm fine," even when you're suffocating inside. You reply to messages instantly, even when you're exhausted. You go out of your way to explain and justify things, as if you owe the world a constant debt that doesn't exist. The truth is that the more you place yourself at the center of other people's stage, the more you disappear from your own. Being constantly available is a subtle form of self-abandonment. It is a disguised way of begging for approval and avoiding rejection, an attempt to control the image that others have of you. But this control comes at an exorbitant price. Your inner peace, your vital energy is distributed as if it were infinite, when in reality, it is your most precious and limited resource. People who expect you to be always available, in truth, do not desire you. They want what you can offer them: validation, companionship, distraction, comfort. They are attracted to your function, not your essence. But when you change, when you finally set a healthy boundary, when you refuse to react, those same people get irritated. They accuse you, they say you have become strange, selfish. It is not because you have changed for the worse, but because you have stopped being functional to their needs. You have stopped being a source of energy. And here is the crucial point. The more available you are, the less value is attributed to you. What is always abundant becomes worthless, almost an emotional rag. No one truly respects what they have not somehow had to earn. No one appreciates what is taken for granted. Rarity creates value. So now stop for a moment and think honestly. Who really deserves your time? Who has earned your attention? Or better yet, who deserves your strategic and powerful absence? Before we respond, we need to understand why we react so strongly. What lies behind this almost automatic need to respond and justify ourselves? The answer, according to Jung, lies in the concept of psychic energy. And that's what we're going to talk about now because it's fundamental. Your energy is all you have. And if you don't learn to protect it, you can be sure that someone, sooner or later, will use it against you. Carl Jung did not see the psyche as a machine that reacts to stimuli. For him, our mind is a complex and autonomous energy system. Every thought, every emotion, every action you perform consumes a part of this limited and precious energy. The fundamental question is, are you choosing where to direct your energy, or are you letting the outside world decide for you? Every time you react impulsively, you are wasting your psychic energy. When you defend yourself from criticism that didn't deserve attention, you are opening a hole. When you respond to a provocation just to prove yourself right, you are giving your strength away to someone who doesn't deserve it at all. When you engage in pointless discussions or try to please someone who doesn't respect you, you are wasting your inner strength in activities that drain you. And Jung was very clear about this. What you resist persists. The more you react, the more you become energetically tied to that situation or person. People who live in a state of constant emotional exhaustion are not weak. They are simply people who direct their energy in the wrong direction. And what happens to those who live constantly exhausted? They become vulnerable. And when you are in this state of vulnerability, you become easy prey. Manipulative people, opportunists, and narcissists have a radar for this. They sense your weakened energy and take advantage of it. They notice that you don't know how to guard your energy field, that you react to everything. They notice that you are always trying to save the world and they take advantage of it without scruples. Jung argued that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within its system, conserving it with care. This, in practice, means knowing how to say no without feeling guilty. It means knowing how to remain silent in the face of an attack without feeling like a coward. It means learning to observe carefully before acting. True power lies not in reaction, but in conscious choice. And that's only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your automatic impulses and choose not to follow them. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved argument? How many hours have you spent ruminating on what you should have said? This is energy being drained from your present with no return. You are keeping ghosts alive and fueling toxic dynamics that exist only because you insist on responding and reacting. Psychic energy, if well guarded, creates a force field, a presence. You walk into a room and command respect without saying a word. But if you handle it badly, you become invisible, reactive, fragile. So, start observing your emotional triggers today. What makes you react automatically? What makes you lose your center? These are the exact points where your energy leaks out. This is where you have to work, not to become cold, but to become selective, to finally become the ruler of your inner kingdom. And this is where the depth of Jung's thought is revealed. When you conserve your energy, you break the projections that others have about you. And this takes us into fascinating and dark territory, that of silent manipulation and invisible power games. In the next part, we will explore how opportunists feed off your energy. You think you have control over your choices and reactions, but the truth is that most of our emotional responses are programmed. They are learned automatisms, and those who understand this mechanism can manipulate you with disconcerting ease without you realizing it. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voice or threaten. They simply push the emotional buttons you've left uncovered. They know what words to say, what looks to use, what guilt to induce, and you react. You always react in the same, predictable way. Carl Jung called this mechanism projection. It is the process by which people unconsciously attribute to others traits, desires, or faults that they cannot see in themselves. But there is another side to the phenomenon that is crucial for you. While others project their needs onto you, being too available, become the perfect receptacle. You become a blank canvas on which anyone can paint their dramas. Think of that friend who contacts you only and exclusively when he is in crisis. Think of that partner who always needs you to save them. Think of that person who praises you, but only as long as you are useful to them. None of this is coincidental, and it has nothing to do with you. It is about the role that you, more or less consciously, have accepted to play. And why do you accept it? Because you are afraid of being disappointed, of not being loved, afraid more than anything else, of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation happens in the sneaky silence of guilt. When you feel you owe something to the other, you are already trapped. When you believe you have to be available, that you have to help, even when it destroys you. And here is the central point of the manipulative mechanism. The manipulator does not need to actively control you. He just needs you to continue to react in exactly the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game stops abruptly. When you start saying no, responding with silence, the projections that have been thrown at you begin to crumble. The mask that has been put on your face falls to pieces. And that leaves people confused because they don't know who you are anymore. And worse for them, they are now forced to look at themselves. They are forced to confront the void they were trying to fill by using you. Your new unavailability becomes a mirror they can't stand. The silence you offer reveals the deafening noise they have inside. And then come the attacks, the criticisms, the emotional drama. Not because you have made a mistake, but because you have stopped being a comfortable mirror. Jung said, "By making darkness conscious, we reach enlightenment." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the reactive cycle, the shadow of others, their inner darkness begins to emerge. And this is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape. But are you ready to face this discomfort? Are you prepared to be misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked just to protect yourself? Are you prepared to endure the silence that follows the breaking of these toxic bonds? Because it is precisely in that silence that a new, authentic kind of power is born. And it is this power that we will talk about now. You will understand why silence can be the most devastating and at the same time most constructive weapon of the human psyche, and how it completely changes the power dynamics between you and the world. The modern world is noisy, chaotic, hyper-connected. Everyone wants to be heard, to be the first to respond, to win useless debates. But there is a power that few know, the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity, but strategic, conscious silence. That kind of silence that is not absence, but amplified presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as fertile ground for transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe. And by observing, you see patterns that previously, in the noise, went unnoticed. Silence gives you clarity, and clarity is dangerous for those who live to control you. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond? When you don't explain yourself? When you simply disappear from the conversation? It's not because they genuinely miss you. It's because your silence takes away their control of the narrative. As long as you speak, as long as you defend yourself, you are still in their game. But when you are silent, you change the rules of the game in your favor, and that unbalances anyone who thrives on your reaction. True silence is not the absence of voice, it is the mastery of one's energy. It is the refusal to be dragged down by the emotional storms of others. It is the choice not to engage in battles that are not worth your peace. Jung said that individuation requires this distancing, because only in silence can you finally hear your inner voice. But this power comes at a price, and you have to be willing to pay it. Strategic silence will alienate you from people who only valued you for your role. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through their projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, perhaps even arrogant. But this is just the reaction of someone who never wanted your depth, but only your usefulness. The more you mature, the more selective you become with your words and your interactions, because you understand that every conversation is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves to have access to your inner world. Sometimes, silence is not a retreat. It is an act of sovereignty. It is the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is uncomfortable for others because it forces them to confront their own thoughts, their own noise, their own emptiness. And their discomfort reveals more than any argument ever could. You don't need to explain your absence. Your absence explains itself. And those who feel threatened by it reveal their dependence. But the most powerful silence is the one that rebuilds you from the inside out. It is the silence that connects you to something beyond external approval. It is in this inner space that you begin to reclaim your life energy, because it is not enough to eliminate external noise. You must relearn how to use your energy consciously. It is time to be selective with your soul. It is no use understanding all this only on an intellectual level. If then, in practice, you continue to say yes when you would like to say no, if you continue to respond to messages that annoy you, and if you continue to maintain relationships that exist only by inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. Real transformation begins when you decide to become selective, and that requires emotional discipline, constant training. Conscious unavailability does not mean being cold or indifferent. It means no longer being accessible to anyone at any time. It means taking back control of your energy, your time, your peace. And that starts with small, yet powerful, daily actions. Don't respond immediately. Breathe before you react. Walking away from a discussion before you get dragged into chaos. Turning off your phone without feeling guilty. Saying, "Not today." Saying, "I'm not interested." But here's the most important part. You don't have to justify your absence. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't owe anyone anything but yourself. And that, for many people, is an unforgivable act, because when you refuse to explain, you take away the other person's power to keep you within their emotional narrative. That narrative in which you are always available, understanding, and accessible. Jung understood that every process of individuation passes through isolation. Not a depressive isolation, but a sacred isolation, an interior retreat in which to relearn to listen to one's own voice without the interference of the world, where to rebuild one's identity from one's own center. Want a thermometer for your evolution? Watch who distances themselves from you when you become more reserved. Watch who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Watch who accuses you of having changed when you finally start to protect yourself. These are positive signs. I am proof that you have begun to break free from your chains. Being unavailable is uncomfortable at first. You will feel guilty. You will think you are selfish. But it is part of the process of deconstruction. You have spent your life being conditioned to put yourself second. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you are saying yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you reaffirm that your peace is more valuable. And when you stop explaining yourself, You start being respected. But not everyone is ready for this kind of presence. Your emotional absence will expose wounds that they do not want to face. And that is when the breakup comes, and with it, the pain, the loneliness, the feeling of losing something, when in reality, you are freeing yourself. But what happens next? What is born from silence? In the last part, we will talk about this rebirth that happens only when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become complete by yourself. It is the path to true freedom. When you stop being available to everyone, something profound happens. First comes silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream. You wonder if you did the right thing, if you were too harsh. But gradually, this silence transforms. It begins to purify. And then comes loneliness, but not the loneliness of absence. It is the loneliness of total presence, yours. The loneliness of the strong, of those who no longer betray themselves to keep others close. And in that space, where there was confusion, clarity enters. Where there was anxiety, peace enters. Where there was need, strength enters. The strength to be whole within oneself. Jung said individuation requires distancing oneself from the collective, disidentifying from the mask, walking alone for a while. That's what you do when you become unreachable. You are not running away from the world. You are returning to yourself. This is where you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You stop being shaped by circumstances and start shaping your reality. People who are uncomfortable with your absence reveal that they never wanted you. They wanted the role you played, and now that you don't fit in anymore, they don't know what to do, and that's liberating. You'll lose people, but you'll find yourself. You'll move away from places, but you'll reconnect with your essence. You'll be misunderstood, but eventually you'll start to be respected. Because when you are no longer available for anything, you become precious, rare. This is a rebirth, a new beginning of a life where you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, for mind games, for voids disguised as affection. Now you accept only what resonates with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. And if you've come this far, it's because a part of you is already ready. A part of you has understood that being loved means nothing if you have to abandon yourself to do so. And that true self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you to be alone for a while.
Have you ever felt an inexplicable chill, a subtle but persistent shiver while in the presence of another person? An almost imperceptible sensation that something invisible, yet deeply disturbing, was masterfully hiding behind the smooth facade of their smile or their kind words. It is not a fantasy, but a primal intuition that our most instinctive part recognizes, even when the rational mind cannot give it a name. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the most brilliant and controversial pioneers of depth psychology, devoted decades of his clinical work to exploring these hidden dynamics. In the course of his investigations, he identified an alarming behavioral pattern. A silent signal that, once understood, reveals itself as an indicator of a psychological danger far greater and more insidious than any overt physical threat. This indicator, often ignored by our waking consciousness, but captured with unerring precision by our instincts, does not manifest itself through aggressive words, overtly toxic behavior, or acts of open hostility. Its nature is much more subtle, and precisely because of its elusiveness, it becomes infinitely more dangerous. But before we continue, like the video, share it with those who might appreciate it, and tell us in the comments which city you follow our channel from. Stay with us, because what you discover could permanently transform your perception of yourself and your existence. Are you ready to reveal the real secret why time seems untouched by you? Let's get started. Ancient wisdom traditions, from east to west, had already warned humanity against individuals who manifest these characteristics. However, it was Jung who was the first to articulate with scientific rigor what our ancestors had only intuited through myths and metaphors. The most disconcerting aspect is that this danger signal can emerge in people who, at first glance, appear absolutely normal, balanced, even charismatic and charming. And when you finally recognize it, the only sensible reaction The only move to preserve your psychological integrity is to walk away without hesitation. Shadow projection, seeing your demons in others. Perhaps the most dangerous psychological mechanism Jung ever identified in human relationships is shadow projection. Imagine this scene. You are having a pleasant conversation with an acquaintance, a friend, or a partner. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, this person begins to attribute to you malicious intentions, thoughts you never formulated, or negative qualities that are not yours in the slightest. He accuses you of being selfish, manipulative, dishonest, or angry, when in reality you feel calm and well-disposed. In that precise moment, you are no longer interacting with the real person in front of you. You are being attacked by a distorted and fictitious version of yourself, a caricature that exists only in their mind. If this dynamic sounds familiar, you have experienced Jungian shadow projection in its purest form. The shadow, according to Jung, is the receptacle of everything we reject and deny about ourselves. It contains the aspects of our personality that, by education, culture, or personal choice, we consider unacceptable, shameful, or inferior. These elements, our greed, our anger, our envy, our vulnerability, do not disappear simply because we ignore them. On the contrary, they are relegated to the depths of the unconscious, where they continue to live, accumulating energy and looking for a way to manifest themselves. When an individual systematically projects their shadow onto others, they are displaying the most dangerous sign identified by Jung, the complete inability to recognize and accept their own dark sides. This person is literally blind to their own flaws. Unable to see them in themselves, their psychic apparatus projects them outward, perceiving them vividly and unmistakably in others. The deadly danger of this dynamic is that, from their distorted perspective, you are actually and objectively embodying those negative aspects. They are not consciously lying. They actually see in you the malice and darkness that they cannot admit as their own. This perceptual distortion creates an unshakable conviction, a type of certainty that is tragically persuasive even to those observing from the outside. The person who projects can easily convince an entire group of friends or colleagues that you are exactly as he describes you, because he speaks with the strength of someone who believes he is right. Ancient spiritual traditions had captured this phenomenon. In Buddhism, we speak of the mirror darkened, which reflects one's own impurities as if they belong to the outside world. In the Christian tradition, we find the powerful metaphor of the log in one's own eye, while being obsessed with the mote in the other's eye. Contemporary neuroscience has even confirmed that our brain tends to filter reality to confirm pre-existing beliefs, a mechanism that, in cases of massive projection, becomes a real falsification of reality. The telltale sign for you is a deep and unbridgeable discrepancy between what this person says about you and your authentic inner experience. You feel accused of motivations you don't have, of emotions you don't feel. And the accusation is made with absolute certainty, impervious to any evidence or argument to the contrary. When you experience this, remember, you are not the problem. You have become, in spite of yourself, the battlefield of a devastating internal war that does not belong to you. Psychic inflation, the dangerous mask of virtue. An old proverb says, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Jung would probably have added that that road is traveled with enthusiasm by those who consider themselves indisputably and infallibly good. This brings us to the second sign, perhaps the most alarming of all, psychic inflation. When you observe someone completely and utterly convinced of their moral superiority, their spiritual infallibility, or their possession of an absolute and unassailable truth, you are witnessing what Jung called psychic inflation. Unlike simple arrogance, which is often clumsy and easily recognizable, Jungian inflation is a much deeper, subtler, and more dangerous phenomenon. It occurs when an individual's ego, their personal and limited consciousness, identifies with universal archetypal contents, particularly the archetype of the savior, the enlightened sage, or the bringer of truth. This person no longer perceives himself as a simple human being, with his limitations and contradictions. He sees himself as a vehicle of the divine, a direct representative of the absolute, a pure channel of the good. The German mystic Meister Eckhart warned centuries ago against what he called the subtlest trap of the spiritual path. Zen traditions call it Zen disease, while Sufis speak of the veil of light, considered even more dangerous than the veil of darkness, because it is much more difficult to recognize as an obstacle. An unmistakable sign of psychic inflation emerges when you notice that this person never doubts his own motivations. While the greatest sages and saints in history have always expressed profound humility in the face of the mysteries of existence, the inflated individual displays a granite certainty. He does not contemplate the possibility of being wrong, because in his mind he is not expressing personal opinions, but channeling universal truths. What makes this state particularly dangerous is its ability to generate extraordinary charisma. Jung observed how political leaders, gurus, and charismatic leaders with severe psychic inflation were able to attract crowds of devoted followers, precisely because of the absolute conviction they radiated. This artificial certainty satisfies our deep and human need for security and definitive answers in a complex and uncertain world. How can you recognize psychic inflation? Look carefully at the person's reaction to criticism or simple disagreement. A psychologically healthy person can accept criticism, think about it, and even reject it, but he processes it as information. The person with archetypal ego inflation, on the other hand, does not perceive disagreement as a different opinion, but as a personal affront to the cosmic order, a resistance to the good and truth that he himself embodies. Your question is not a question, it is an act of heresy. Jung warned that this state represents an immense danger not only for others, but above all, for those who live it. The identification of the small ego with the immense transpersonal energies of the archetypes subjects the psyche to an unbearable tension. Inevitably, this tension requires compensation. The greater the inflation, the more dramatic and devastating the collapse will be when the dark, denied, and repressed aspects finally emerge to claim their space. The perfect mask. The void behind social impeccability. What could be more disturbing than a person who shows you, at every moment and in every circumstance, exactly what you expect to see? Jung discovered a deeply disturbing behavioral pattern in some individuals, a social adaptation so perfect, so flawless, that it has eliminated every trace of roughness, every contradiction, every beneficial and revealing human spontaneity. This social mask, or persona, a term Jung borrowed from Greek theater, where it referred to the mask worn by actors, when it is completely fused with the individual's identity, represents a very powerful alarm signal. Our instincts detect it long before our conscious mind is able to give it a name. Total identification with the persona constitutes an extraordinary psychological danger because it signals a complete and tragic dissociation between the external image and the internal being. The individual has sacrificed his own authenticity on the altar of social acceptance, building a facade so elaborate, so convincing, that even he himself has forgotten what lies behind it. As the poet Fernando Pessoa so masterfully stated, the danger lies not so much in the mask as in forgetting to wear it. Eastern contemplative traditions have explored this phenomenon for millennia. Zen Buddhism speaks of the original face before birth, that authentic essence that exists beyond our social constructs. Taoist masters warned of the danger of polishing the surface to the point of wearing away the substance. Jung, once again, translated these ancient insights into the rigorous language of modern psychology. The warning signal is when you sense a strange and persistent sense of artificiality in your interactions. This person's behavior is technically perfect. He always knows what to say, how to act, what facial expressions to adopt for every occasion. Yet all this is devoid of the unpredictability, the small inconsistencies and the vulnerability that characterize authentic humanity. As the Jungian analyst James Hollis pointed out, too much perfection in social adaptation often indicates a void of equal and opposite proportions in the inner life. Contemporary neuroscience has identified so-called mirror neurons in our brains, which are remarkably adept at detecting subtle inconsistencies between the verbal language, facial expressions, and body posture of others. When someone's social mask is completely disconnected from their internal reality, these neurons generate an alarm signal that we perceive consciously as an inexplicable feeling of discomfort, distrust, or coldness. The real danger, however, lies in what this extreme dissociation hides. When an individual has invested all his psychic energy in maintaining an impeccable external image, the rejected aspects of his personality do not vanish. On the contrary, they accumulate in the unconscious, becoming more and more powerful and primitive, forming a dense and chaotic shadow. And the more rigid and perfect the persona, the more untamable and potentially destructive the shadow will be when, inevitably, it finds a way to emerge. Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's closest associates, observed that it is precisely those people with perfect social adaptation who most often experience episodes of shadow eruptions, sudden and inexplicable moments in which all the repressed energy explodes in unpredictable, violent, and destructive ways. This explains the paradox of how people who are apparently so good and controlled can be capable of the most astonishingly evil or irrational acts. Complete identification with the social persona represents, in the final analysis, a profound betrayal of the self, an abandonment of one's soul in favor of an artificial construction. And like every fundamental betrayal, in the end, it takes its toll. The path of transformation, the conscious integration of the shadow. If the signs we have explored so far reveal the deepest psychological dangers according to Jung, fortunately, there is a transformative path that allows us to transcend these threats, the conscious integration of the shadow. This internal process represents the fundamental difference between a psychologically dangerous person and an individual who has courageously undertaken the journey towards psychic wholeness, or individuation. The fascinating thing is that we can learn to recognize the signs of this integration as clearly as we identify its dangerous absence. And when we perceive these signs in someone, we are faced with the exact antithesis of psychological danger, a person with whom it is possible to build an authentic and mature relationship. Shadow integration does not mean achieving moral perfection or the absence of negative aspects. On the contrary, it implies a humble, honest, and conscious recognition of one's capacity to embody all the errors, baseness, and darkness that we so easily observe in others. It is encapsulated in Jung's famous and often misunderstood phrase, "I would rather be whole than good." This statement is not an apologia for evil, but a declaration in favor of authentic psychological integrity, as opposed to a mask of artificial goodness that hides dangerous internal divisions. Contemplative traditions have articulated this same process for millennia. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of turning poison into medicine, or recognizing and constructively using even the most difficult emotions and tendencies. Western alchemy, which so fascinated Jung, symbolically represented this process as the transmutation of lead, the base and discarded aspects of the personality, into gold, integrated consciousness. The indicators of a person who has genuinely undertaken this path are unmistakable. The first is a peculiar combination of radical honesty towards his own shadows and, consequently, a deep compassion towards the shadows of others. This person can admit his selfish impulses, his moments of envy, or his irrational thoughts without falling into excessive shame or, on the contrary, self-indulgence. He simply recognizes them as unavoidable aspects of the human condition, which require constant vigilance and awareness. Neuroscience researchers like Daniel Siegel have documented how this integration process has observable neurophysiological correlates. The integration of previously dissociated aspects of experience literally creates new neural connections, particularly between the brain's most primitive emotional centers, like the amygdala, and prefrontal areas associated with self-awareness and reflection. What is truly transformative is the paradox at the heart of this process. Consciously acknowledging our darkest and most difficult aspects dramatically reduces the likelihood of unconsciously and destructively acting them out. As Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson observed, "What we deny does not go away. It simply manifests in forms over which we have much less control." Integration, on the other hand, transforms potentially destructive psychic energy into creative force and available wisdom. The person who has begun this inner work demonstrates a unique quality, the ability to see the world in shades of gray rather than in absolute black and white. He abandons the rigid and infantile distinction between good and bad, recognizing the complex and universal mixture of light and shadow in every human being, starting with himself. As James Hollis has beautifully summarized, psychological maturity begins the very moment we abandon the fantasy of our absolute innocence. The authentic spiritual masters of history have always embodied this integration. The Dalai Lama can speak openly about his moments of anger. Saint Teresa of Avila described her long periods of spiritual aridity and doubt without filters. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote immortal poems about his inner contradictions. This radical honesty is the hallmark of true wisdom and contrasts sharply with the artificial and fragile perfection of those who are dangerously dissociated from their shadow. The most reliable indicator of integration in progress is, finally, a rare combination of genuine humility, not false modesty, and authentic personal authority, not authoritarianism. The integrated person does not need to proclaim his or her goodness or wisdom because he or she has transcended the desperate need to cling to a flawless self-image. He or she has found peace in his or her wholeness, and this peace is the greatest gift he or she can offer to himself or to the world. Before we say goodbye, take a moment to reflect. Have you recognized any of these signs in the important people in your life? Or, an even more courageous and transformative question, have you identified traces of these patterns within yourself? If this journey into Jung's thought has touched you deeply, let us know in the comments. Remember, awareness is not a judgment, but the first indispensable step towards true transformation. Don't forget to share this content with anyone who may need to awaken to the unconscious patterns that govern their relationships. Activate the notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss our future insights into the fascinating and complex Jungian universe.